Hello, and welcome to HSGP's Sunday Speaker Series. I am Ron Russell, your program director here at HSGP, and we will continue to provide content digitally until we can gather together again. If anyone has any content or wants to help with content or do the Humanist Minute, please see me, one of the other directors, or if you have a suggestion for a Sunday speaker, put it into the website. We have a form submission that is there. Some basic ground rules. Stay muted unless you're actively speaking. Don't be offended if I mute you due to background noise. Raise your hand to ask questions during Q&A and I will call on you. You can either use the in the application, there's a raise hand feature under participants, or you can raise your hand and hopefully someone will notify that. If you have a question, you can also type it in chat and I will read it out for you. Please share the air, practice the 10 commitments of humanism, and after the recording stops, hang out and chat and catch up after. With that, I would like to hand it over first to Luke, then to Alex, then to Mars before we get to our Sunday speakers. Luke, you're up.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning, everybody. I'm Luke Douglas, the Executive Director of the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix. So good to see all of your faces today. I know that it's hard meeting virtually instead of in person. It doesn't look like we're going to be opening in person anytime soon with the way cases are going. And I wanted to reiterate the importance of these precautions. I know many of you know our friend Mark Hsgb. He's the founder and leader of Kingman Free Thinkers, which is really our equivalent organization up in northern Arizona. He is in the ICU right now with COVID, obviously, but with very serious problems with his O2, and he's been in the hospital for several days. And we just received update. Looks like he is, fine as of now, but it's going to be a long journey. So everybody, please social distance, wear your masks, use hand sanitizer, and wash your hands, because this is a very serious thing that we need to continue to live with until cases can go down again and we can see each other in person. Speaking of virtual events, I know we've been making calls about the solstice celebration. It's our 22nd annual celebration to welcome the coming of light, the coming of longer days. And we are very excited to see everybody there. Mars and I have been making calls, asking people to attend and also to consider becoming life members in consideration of our 22nd annual winter solstice celebration. So if you receive a call, please do consider the possibility of contributing a life membership or whatever you're able to do, because everything we do is made possible by our members. We just want to make sure that everybody who finds their home at HSGP can plug in with whatever time, talent, or treasure they're able to give so that we can keep bringing this great content to you. And with that, I think I'm ready to pass it to Alex.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Zigman. I am the president of the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix. So glad to see everybody in the Zoom call this morning. It's very good to see smiling faces. One thing I did want to mention this morning, as Luke kind of mentioned as well, cases are rising here in Arizona. As such, we are going to be delaying the reopening of the community center. Right now, we are just seeing way too many cases, over 4,300 in the past 24 hours. So please, please, please wear your mask, be vigilant. Like I'll give you kind of a personal story. My own stepfather has been diagnosed. My mother is having to stay distanced away from him. So this affects people all over this country, but please, please, please wear your mask, wash your hands, stay socially distanced, use hand sanitizer, everything that you could possibly do to stay healthy, because we do this in isolation so that when we get back together, nobody is missing. That being said, we are going to be we're right now going through board elections, so check your email. Also go through your make sure you check your spam folder to make sure that the board positions that are going to be voted for are not in your spam folder. So check your email. we'll be sending that out soon. And we're very much looking forward to 2021, even though we are right now, it's difficult to see the path forward based on the COVID numbers and everything that's going on. But 2021 is looking to be a wonderful year for HSGP. We could definitely use your thoughts as far as what you would like to see. Please send it my way. It's president@hsgp.org. Love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, and even if you want to contribute, volunteer, help out, and we will, trust me, we can find a place for you. That being said, please stay safe, please stay healthy, and I hope you enjoy the meeting.
Hi, good morning. I'm Mars De La Torre, the volunteer coordinator for HSGB. I just want to take a moment to mention all the volunteers that help bring HSGP to life and create this fantastic community that we're all part of. There are a lot of different events on our calendar, and there's a lot of other secular groups in the area that share similar programming like we do. You can visit Secular AZ, which is Secular Coalition's website, secularaz.org, and see an event calendar for some of our programs and our allied partners in the area. And then the best place to check out all of our programs is on our website, hsgp.org, or on Meetup. And you can also stay tuned through Facebook as well for all of our programs. So I just want to give thanks to the volunteers that are running all the different programs that you'll see on our calendar. Sharon Lee does a hike at South Mountain twice a week. Once a month, we host the East Valley Gardeners Club. Steve Trezisi and Teresa Kokel host Let's Geography. Richard Dewey hosts Coffee Talk Discussion Group and the Humanist Meditation. Those are weekly programs. The Humanist Project monthly cultural presentation every month is hosted by Zenaido Quintana and Jennifer White. The monthly Leaving Religion Discussion Group is hosted by Elizabeth Sowell. And we have the Intersectional Book Study with Tanya Gerard and the Virtual Book Club with Henry Geist and Vici Duarte. When it comes to the book clubs, if you are purchasing the books, think about doing it through Amazon and remember to use HSGP and Amazon Smiles. It's a great way to contribute a little bit back to our group when you are shopping anyway. And it isn't just for the books that you might be buying, it's for all of your Amazon purchases. So if you aren't already doing that, please look us up through Amazon Smiles. And then thanks very much to Ron Russell for putting together our Sunday speaker program twice a month. And also to Roxanne Earth for assisting with that and helping our programs. Another shout out to Jordan Foltz, who's helping with IT and media. And please check out our YouTube channel. I know you hear people say a lot, subscribe and watch and set notifications to get reminders. And it is really important. It's a small way that you can help the group by subscribing to our YouTube channel and watching the videos. The more subscribers we have and the more video time we get, then the more HSGP can be seen in searches. And then finally, a big thanks to all the sausage makers. That's our volunteer board. Alex Zigman, our president. Athena Gibbons, our vice president. Sarah Jones, our secretary. Carol Abel, our treasurer. Ron Russell, our programs director. James Osborne on membership and IT. Howard Johnson, our facilities chair, and Jennifer White on communications. And again, folks, I'd love to add your name to this list. And thank you for those of you that have accepted nominations for our upcoming board. I'm glad that our community is growing stronger and stronger all the time. And you can reach me anytime using volunteer@hsgp.org. I would like to ask today if you all could take a moment now or throughout the program today to hop on into the chat and just give us one suggestion of something that's been on your mind, of something you think that you might like to see HSGP do. It could be something that was a program that we did before that you'd like to see us resurrect, or maybe you just thought, or you saw something that another group is doing and thought, hey, HSGP should do that too. Maybe it's something that you had a passion about and you were just interested in, you know, or maybe it's just a little note about a way that you might like to volunteer, something that, a way that you can give, like if you are good at making phone calls or you're good at posting on Facebook or other things like that. So if everybody could just take a moment throughout today and just pop that on into the chat for me, I'd really appreciate that. Again, it's Mars, and you can reach me at volunteer@hsgp.org anytime. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mars. Today we have Shira Zias and Rick Mitchell with observations of homelessness. And why this presentation aligns with our values, one is around empathy. Empathy means entering imaginatively into another's situation in an attempt to understand their experience as though we are experiencing it ourselves. Empathy requires a person to step outside of their own perspective and consider someone else's thoughts, feelings, or circumstances from that person's point of view. Altruism is the selfless concern for the welfare of other living beings without expectation of reward, recognition, or return. The collective welfare of our communities and society depends on the welfare of each individual person. And finally, critical thinking. As we are each bombarded with a constant stream of information, it can become challenging to decide what is accurate and true. Thinking critically allows us to make sense of all of this information and reason our way to good judgments and effective solutions to the problems we face, while rigorously avoiding pitfalls like rationalization, conformity, and stereotyping. First, we have Shira Zias. She works in the field of forensic social work and behavioral health. She is a clinical manager at Sage Counseling, an agency that provides counseling and diversion for individuals involved in the criminal justice system. She oversees a program for individuals being released from prison. In addition, she has been a lay legal advocate on the Human Services campus since 2013, representing clients at the Maricopa County Regional Homeless Court. Shira is also a board member of the Homeless ID Project. With her today, we have Rick Mitchell, the executive director of the Homeless ID Project, currently a resident of Phoenix. Rick was born in Chicago and moved from coast to coast over his course of his professional career, settling in the Valley with his wife, Sydney, in 2003. Prior to his appointment as executive director and CEO, Rick served on the Homeless ID Project Board of Directors. Rick also serves as a board member and secretary of the UBU Project, a nonprofit whose mission to end youth suicide, bullying, and addiction. Rick has a personal passion for his nonprofit work that is based in values instilled in him long ago. With that, I would like to bring Shira on to start the presentation. Shira.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for having us here today. I've actually been following the group for several years, so all the emails that Mars, all the activities that Mars mentioned, I've actually been lurking, and I always plan on attending and usually don't for time reasons. The only talk I've actually attended was a few years ago, and it was the talk about Buddhism, which was when Ron spoke. So I really appreciate having this opportunity to speak to like-minded individuals. Today, Rick and I are going to talk about homelessness. We're going to talk about the Human Service Campus, which is in downtown Phoenix. We will be highlighting 2 campus partners that we're both involved in. And we'll go into specific details about those programs and how that fits into some barriers and issues that come up for those experiencing homelessness. our hope today is that you'll come away with maybe a different understanding or perspective of homelessness, knowledge of what is currently being done right here in our community, because it's a lot, and we have a lot of interesting programs in Maricopa County, and also with a sense of what you could do about homelessness should you choose to, and ways to support our community. And with that, I'll pass it on to Rick.
Thank you, Shira. Can everybody see the screen? You see a picture of a group
Yes,
of
we
people? Oh, great. Because I want to make sure I share the screen properly. Thank you for having us. I really appreciate this opportunity to. I always appreciate an opportunity to talk about the Homeless ID Project and the Homeless ID Project in specific, and the Human Service Campus in general. It's an amazing set of things that exist in our community that a lot of folks don't know about. And in a non-COVID world, I would be inviting you all to come down to the Human Service Campus and take a look and take a walk around the 13-acre campus and see what's there. It's absolutely incredible. So if I can position my slideshow in the right place, I want to start out by talking about the concept of homelessness, because I think we're all kind of conflicted about it, and we see different things that we think are representative of homelessness. And some people think that homelessness is a choice and it's self-inflicted, and those sorts of things. So I just want to take a few minutes to talk about the lack of understanding and the confliction, if you will, that's caused by that lack of understanding. I mean, I don't know, so I'm either going to put it out of my mind, or I'm going to conclude that it's one thing or another thing. And I think it's important to try and really understand what it is. So I will tell you that for me, and I've been doing this work for a while. I've been the executive director for a little over 3 years, and I was on the board of directors prior to that. And my wife was a volunteer for the Homeless ID Project for a few years even prior. So coming up on close to 10 years involved with this community. And even after 10 years, when I hear the phrase homeless person, a picture comes across my mind. And that picture is a picture of an old guy with a gray beard sitting on a curb somewhere. And the person in that picture it may be homeless, is probably homeless, maybe chronically homeless, but that's not a picture of what homelessness necessarily is. We get off the I-10 on a freeway ramp and see a guy with a sign, and there's a sense that that person is homeless, and maybe he is homeless and maybe he's not. Maybe he's a panhandler, and we don't know. But that's one of those things that we see that we're somehow conflicted with, and we don't really know what to do about it, what to feel about it, what to think about it, whether we should give them $2 or not give them $2. And we have a sense that we want to do something, we want to help, but we're not really too sure what to do. So I hope that we come away today with some sense of what homelessness is, and maybe what homelessness is not, and what we can do about it, if anything, in our community. So when you read a story in the the AZ Central or any other media outlet, you'll see a number in Maricopa County. They'll say 6,614 people homeless in Maricopa County this year. Oh, it's homelessness at 6,614 people. Well, there's a thing called the PIT count, the point in time count, and it occurs in major metropolitan areas across the country. It is a HUD mandated thing. And once a year, volunteers will go out into the street on a night in January, and they'll count the people who are in shelters and the people who are on the street, in washes, under bridges, what have you, in a certain locations. And that number in January of 2018 was 6,614. And I assure you that is not representative of the homeless population. Those folks are homeless, maybe some of the more chronically or more difficult homeless. When I say difficult, I mean difficult to get to end their homelessness, but that's not representative, I don't believe, of the homeless population. The last really good number that I saw was a HUD number. It was at the end of 2016, and according to HUD, at that point, there were 37,404 homeless in the state of Arizona, half of those in families with children. One of our sister organizations, an organization we work with, is an organization called the Homeless Youth Connection. And according to the Homeless Youth Connection, there are 8,000 homeless youth, school-age kids in Maricopa County. And that's just kids. That's not the families surrounding those kids and that sort of thing. And many of those kids are, off on their own. So it's really, to think about homelessness, it's a big number, but it's not all one thing. It is certainly not a monolith. In 2018, in Maricopa County, there were 44,000 families, not 44,000 individuals, but 44,000 families evicted from their homes and apartments in 2018 in Maricopa County. Now, if you're evicted, at least for a moment, you're homeless. And maybe you can rent another place right away or buy another place right away, or maybe you're staying in a hotel room. And people who are living in hotel rooms or living on their relative's couch or living in their van are homeless. I mean, that is part of the homeless population. They do not have a secure place to stay, a secure place that they know that they can in the next day or the next week or the next month count on to be there. And that is a bit what homelessness looks like. There's an individual up in Utah, I should say there was, a gentleman named Lloyd Pendleton who unfortunately died earlier this year, not COVID related, but anyway, Lloyd Pendleton was the director of the Utah Homeless Task Force for many years. And his focus, and he helped to bring a lot of focus around the country on homelessness to the chronically homeless. And he was one of the first guys that talked about housing first. And housing first is a really important project, but it's not the only project, and it's not the only project that's working on different areas of homelessness. In any event, what Lloyd Pendleton said is that 75% of the homeless population, 75% of these people who are homeless today will not be homeless a year from now. Now that sounds like good news. I mean, that's, and it is encouraging. It's the kind of thing that keeps us working because we're about ending homelessness. But 75% of the people who are homeless today will not be homeless a year from now. Now there'll probably be another 75 or 80% that'll backfill that, and we'll be, kind of around the same numbers, or maybe creeping up a little bit. But it's important to keep that in mind, that the homeless population is not that chronically homeless individual that goes across my mind when I think about homeless individual. In fact, 15% of the homeless population is chronically homeless. So that's, that seems to make it somehow more manageable and more approachable and more workable. And if we can get a picture in our mind that homelessness is not just that old gray-haired guy sitting on a curb that we may or may not ever be able to solve his problem, maybe we can keep him comfortable, that homelessness is something that is somehow more approachable. So 75% will not be homeless within a year, 15% are chronically homeless, and 10% are what they call episodically homeless, that is in and out of homelessness over a period of time. The number one predictor of an individual who's homeless becoming chronically homeless is time. What I mean by that is the longer that someone is on the street, the more difficult it's going to be to get them off the street. So to provide services for that 75% and for that 10% is really important and kind of what we're aiming at. Now, if we were, I've got this picture on the screen that I haven't talked about yet. The picture on the screen is kind of it's outside the Human Service Campus in downtown Phoenix, and there are really like two different populations down there, because the purpose of the Human Service Campus is it's a place where people can find the resources to end their homelessness. And there are people inside the gates of the Human Service Campus who are accessing those services, and there are people sitting outside the gates that are not, and maybe they're chronically homeless, and I'm not sure what they're up to. But if we were down on the Human Service Campus, standing in the parking lot, getting ready to tour the campus, we would see something that looks and feels a lot like that. You don't have all the senses working when you're doing a virtual tour, but to put that in black and white, sort of feels more that way. And when I'm standing in the parking lot with people getting ready to take a tour of the Human Service Campus, somebody will say, what is this, and what causes this? And somebody else will say, well, it's like alcohol and addiction, and somebody else will say, well, it's mental illness, and I think there's certainly alcohol and addiction induced homelessness, and there's mental illness induced homelessness. But the fact of the matter is that, just think about when I think about myself. If I was one of the 44,000 evicted in 2018 and I ended up on the street, I'm not sure how long I would be on the street with the lack of tools that I have to be on the street before I would begin to suffer something that looks a little bit like, feels a little bit like PTSD. And I'm not sure how long I would be sitting there suffering with that PTSD and other things before somebody came along and offered me an opportunity to take a hit or a shot of something or another to help me relieve some of that PTSD, and that I would, at some point in time, develop some sort of addictive behavior. And so I'm not suggesting that any one of those things is the cause, but I'm saying it's really easy for us to say homeless people addiction, homeless people mental illness. And the fact of the matter is that homelessness, the cause of homelessness, the source of homelessness is many, many, many things. And the result of homelessness is also many things. It could be an end of homelessness, and for 75% it is. It could also be addiction, and it could also be mental illness, and it could also become chronic. So it's really important that we begin to understand this and that we understand where to plug in. So with that, Shira, I will send it back to you.
Thank you, Rick. So we're going to go a little bit over what the campus is, just because it really is an amazing and unique organization, and we'll talk about ways to get involved in tours, and I definitely recommend everyone should tour the campus if you haven't been there before. The first time I came to campus was in 2012. I had just moved here. I was looking forward to move into this field of work, and I was blown away. I had no idea of the need, no idea how many people this affected, and I was just blown away that there was an actual campus for people who are experiencing homelessness, as well as low-income individuals who come to the campus for various services. The Human Service Campus is in downtown Phoenix. It's not far from the state capitol. It's on 12th Avenue in Madison. This area has colloquially always been known as the zone, and it's become the gathering point for many people who are experiencing homelessness. People historically ended up in this area of downtown Phoenix as a result of urban redevelopment, economic slowdown, housing affordability. So this area was sort of known as a place to be if you were experiencing homelessness. And as a response to this, several providers came to this area to provide services. And we're going to talk briefly about all the different agencies, because it's all about collaboration, which is what makes the campus so unique. But some of the initial providers that were there were St. Vincent de Paul, Andre House, St. Joseph's the Worker, CAST, which is the Central Arizona Shelter System, and Maricopa County Healthcare for the Homeless. So they were there in the zone operating independently. After a couple of decades of these services, and these services were in old buildings, sort of the general area, not in one centralized location, it was estimated that about 1,000 people a day were being provided with services. And around this time, I think it was late 90s, early 2000s, there were collaborative efforts of what to do next. The downtown area started to redevelop. The capital area started to redevelop. It became evident too that business owners, that people that lived in that area wanted a say in this. So as a result of the agencies that I mentioned coming together to sort of say, to propose the idea of the campus, and there were a lot of supporters from the county as well. So in 2005, the actual campus was founded. So it's called the Human Services Campus. We refer to it as the campus, as you've noticed. And the picture that you're seeing now is on 12th Avenue in Madison. So it's as you would be walking in. And in 2005, it was founded. And what is unique about it is that it's a collaborative entity that allows each agency to continue operating on its own under this umbrella of the Human Service Campus. And one of the things that is unique, as I feel like I'm mentioning a few times, is the fact that there are nonprofits there, there's county and state agencies, there's faith-based organizations, and it's really a collaborative effort to work with people who are working on ending their homelessness. And it's really created a robust service that's meant to help individuals with a variety of needs. And Rick will talk about the campus as it is now. He'll talk briefly about some of the agencies, and then we'll go into detail about Homeless ID Project, which is on the campus, and also we'll talk about the Homeless Corp, which is on the campus. And I'll pass it to Rick.
Okay, thanks, Shira. Well, let me just be informal a little bit and back up on the slideshow. I want to, we didn't really talk about either of these first two slides in any kind of detail, but this is an aerial view of the 13-acre campus that Shira just talked about, and it's an amazing thing. It's in downtown Phoenix, as Shira said. It's right by the Capitol, and it's really unique. There are a couple organizations like this in the country, and if nobody, I don't think on this call has traveled any time recently, but if you go up and down the West Coast to pretty much any major city or anywhere in the West, and East Coast probably the same thing, as you work your way into downtown to find a meal or a hotel or what have you, you will see people all over the street and people camping and living, and that's been going on for a long time. And you don't see that in Phoenix. And a lot of the reason that you don't see that in Phoenix is because we have this amazing organization, the Human Service Campus. Again, the picture outside of the gates. And then as you look at this picture, this is walking up to the campus gate, and the red brick building on the right is the admin building. And then next to that is the Brian Garcia Welcome Center. And I'll talk about that a little bit. And we'll come back to Circle the City. I'm pointing off to the left because that's where I'm seeing the picture. So if you wonder what I'm pointing at, that white building is the Circle the City Respite Center, which is an amazing and important thing. So let me go to the next slide. This is a picture of the Brian Garcia Welcome Center. It's been open for about 3 years now, donated by the Garcia family Auto Nation and Carvana, and the local entrepreneurs and philanthropists, and they have been one of the primary supporters of the Human Service Campus. The Arizona Thunderbirds have been a primary supporter of the Human Service Campus and of many of the agencies in it. The Thunderbirds, of course, run the Phoenix Open, and the Phoenix Open is going to be different this year than it has been in past years. There's not going to be people there. And so the level of funding that will come from the Thunderbirds is, we're really not sure exactly what's going to happen with that. That's one of the challenges we'll face. So I mentioned that not to, get into the golf tournament or any of those kind of things, but just to say that there's a community of people that are working together to build and support this organization, whose purpose is, and if you drive down there, you'll say, well, that's a place where people are being homeless. Go back to that slide. It looks like a place where people are being homeless. And the fact of the matter is that it's a place where people can find the resources from which they can end their homelessness. So we talk about those resources a little bit. Inside the Brian Garcia Welcome Center, there are 3 things that take place. One of the things that take place is there is intake. And the intake includes a questionnaire, a housing readiness questionnaire, and a benefits eligibility questionnaire, that sort of thing. So we can find out as people come in, what are their needs and what resources are available to help them. So that's very important. And that function is carried on by the Human Service Campus, Inc. Shira mentioned it's a nonprofit that houses other nonprofits. Human Service Campus, Inc. owns the 13-acre campus, owns the land, does provide a lot of the services. And then there are other organizations that rent space from the Human Service Campus. 16 nonprofits. Imagine this, 16 nonprofits all working together. Really, and we're all chasing the same donation dollars, but more importantly, we're all chasing the same end. And we really work well together, as hard as that may be to believe. So you've got the Welcome Center and the intake, and then you've got Homeless ID Project. The 2 pictures on the right of your screen are people waiting to see the Homeless ID Project personnel. And then a really unique organization, a really unique part of the organization is that in the Welcome Center, there is the only volunteer-run U.S. Postal Service in the nation, I'm told, and that may be old news by now. I don't. Maybe somebody else has got one going, but that is very important, as you'll hear from me as I talk about Homeless ID Project in depth a little bit later, and from Shira as she talks about Homeless Court. Like, to have a place to get mail that's not a PO box, it's a street address, is a big deal. So that's the Welcome Center. That's what's in there. Here's Circle the City Medical Clinic. I showed you on the outside of the campus, their respite center. Circle the City Medical Clinic is a medical clinic. And it looks like a medical clinic. And if you went in there, you'd say, oh, this is a medical clinic. It looks just like a medical clinic. And they have doctors and nurses and psychiatric nurses and what have you, and a 50-bed respite center. And Circle the City also has another location on 3rd Avenue where they have another clinic and another respite center. Brighter Way Dental Clinic. Now, remember, the purpose of the campus is to help people find the resources they need to end their homelessness. Well, if you are homeless and toothless, you are going to have a difficult time getting a job, getting up and out. Brighter Way Dental Clinic provides that service, and it's anything from simple cleanings to full mouth dental replacements. And I don't just mean dentures. I mean like you know, the 4-on-1 and all the latest technology. They've got a couple of companies that support them with that technology right there in that building, right here in our town. It's amazing. Brighter Way also has a mobile unit, and then there's an organization on the campus called Elaine. Elaine is a young woman named Vivian Gellert. Her parents are doctors. She graduated from ASU in pre-med, and in the couple of years before she graduated from ASU, she spent time working with the homeless population, and just, you know, to get a sense of what that was, and if she could plug in somewhere there, or what, you know, what kind of, she just wanted to understand it. And she ended up recognizing a hole in services to the homeless population, in that there was no medical transportation to get somebody to a clinic, to get somebody to get a prescription somewhere, or that sort of thing. So she set up a medical transportation organization called Elaine. And as you can see on the side of her van, she's got sponsorship from Valley area Toyota dealers to the tune of 3 vehicles so far and 2 more on the way. It's an amazing thing. And created out of the will of a 24-year-old woman who said, I want to create this. And what can we create out of the will and our word around creating something? I mean, that, to me, that's amazingly inspiring. CAS, Shira mentioned Central Arizona Shelter Services. You might hear people occasionally say, oh yeah, there's things going on down at CAS, or this at CAS, or that at CAS. CAS is not the campus. The campus is the Human Services campus, and CAS is the shelter that exists on the campus. 470 beds, not all 470 beds occupied now because of social distancing, COVID and what have you. But there are people that are staying in some of the other day rooms and whatnot around the campus. So CAS is there, and I want to get to this a little bit later, but I want to talk about, there's an effort right now, 470 beds, and pre-COVID 470 beds, we turn away 500 people a month, not enough beds. And there's an effort right now to attempt to increase the number of beds, and this is a pre-COVID effort, but going on during COVID, to increase the number of beds to 1,000. And some of those would be temporary, and some of them would be in different locations, but it will all be within the footprint of the Human Service campus. And the city council is dragging their feet and hesitating. And I shouldn't say they're dragging their feet. I don't know that they're dragging their feet. What I know is that they haven't said, oh yeah, that's great, let's do it. What has been said is, well, you know, Phoenix does an awful lot. Maybe Glendale and Mesa should be doing some stuff. And maybe Glendale and Mesa should be doing some stuff, but that doesn't mean that Phoenix should be doing more. That's my opinion on that. So anyway, CAS 470 beds. This is a look inside the day room, the Lodestar Day Resource Center. It's a large building, and we're gonna look at some of the organizations down the hallway there. You see that hallway on the right-hand side of the screen. By the way, this picture is probably taken at lunchtime, because at lunchtime they empty the room out. Everybody goes over to St. Vincent de Paul for a meal, and then they clean the day room while that's going on. There are 3 meals a day, 7 days a week on the campus, which is a really, really important thing that I'll come back to in just a little bit. So if we walk down that hallway, we would see other organizations, including on the upper left-hand side of that screen is some DES stuff, Department of Economic Security. Very important to have DES in a place like the Human Service campus, because when the Human Service campus folks do the intake and they determine that somebody's eligible for benefits, you know, where does that person then go for benefits? Well, it used to be until a couple of years ago that they would get on a bus and go to a DES office. And now they just walk across the campus and they can get access to that help right away. And the governor about 3 years ago asked his state directors to be where their services are needed. And Michael Traylor was the director of DES at that time, and he took the governor up on that, opened this DES office, and it is the busiest office in the DES system by services per employee. So it's very important that it's there. You see a clothing closet on the upper left. St. Joseph the Worker is has one of 3 clothing closets on the campus. If people come on the campus, they need clothing. There's a couple different places to get it. That particular clothing closet is connected with St. Joseph the Worker. St. Joseph the Worker provides jobs, and there are 4,000 jobs last year, and jobs for a community of people who have been through a difficult set of circumstances, sometimes coming out of jail or prison, sometimes having been homeless for a period of time, what have you. And they actually bring employers on the campus. They help people with resume writing. They help people with interview skills, and they help people, as you can see from that clothing closet, with having the clothing they need to present themselves in a presentable way at a job interview. And then once a person gets the job, then they provide them with 2 months worth of bus passes just to make sure they get the start. And if they need clothing, like if they've gotten a job in as a cook, you got to have certain kind of pants, certain kind of shoes. They'll provide all of that to get the people up and running and started that way. Catholic Charities is another organization that has a facility down that hallway. It's a facility for military veterans, and just a day room, a place where people military veterans can find access to a computer to get email and bottle of water and some of those kind of things on a hot summer day. And then the last picture on the bottom right, adult probation, is frequently helpful to the Homeless ID Project. Having adult probation on the campus, by the way, the campus is 18 and older, so it's adults. It's single adults, not adults with families. There's another center that takes care of adults with families. So in that population, we frequently need people need to see their probation officer. So we've got that access on the campus. And I'll talk about the Homeless ID Project in just a second here. But one of the things that they will do for us is for us, the Homeless ID Project, is we've got somebody that just came out of jail or prison and they have no way of identifying themselves. Adult probation can sometimes give us what's called an affidavit of identity to say, yes, this person really is who they say they are. And they have a DOC card and this affidavit of identity. And that many times is all we need to give somebody an ID. So let me talk then for a minute about the Homeless ID Project. There's a picture of some of our clients over the years. And Homeless ID Project, founded in 1987, an individual, an amazing individual, Gerald Roseberry, the Reverend Gerald Roseberry, who is now, he will be 89 years old on January 1st. He lives at the Beatitudes campus up on 16th Ave in Glendale. And Jerry was looking around Phoenix in 1987, and he said, where did all these homeless people come from? What's going on here? So he did something that I can't imagine myself doing. He went and lived on the streets for 30 days. And he expected when he went to live on the streets for 30 days that he would find people, sort of contentedly living the hobo life, words to that effect. And what he found instead was people who were attempting to get themselves a start, to get a job, to get an apartment, and they couldn't do it because in many cases they didn't have an ID. And of course, you can't get an ID without an ID. So what do? And these people were just stuck. So Jerry set up an organization called, at that time, the Chaplaincy for the Homeless, since changed its name to the Homeless ID Project, to help people get IDs. The mission of the Homeless ID Project, very important. The mission of the Homeless ID Project is not to get people IDs. The mission of the Homeless ID Project is to empower people to end their homelessness. And our contribution to that is getting IDs for people. So we're not just going out on a busy corner somewhere and handing out MVD vouchers to people who don't have IDs. We actually want to and intend to and do work with other agencies that are helping people end their homelessness. That's what the campus is all about, is a collaborative effort to get all the resources lined up. In each of the last couple of years, we've done about 7,500 documents, but that's a lot of documents, by the way. Half of those birth certificates, half of them state IDs. If somebody comes in to see us, they've had a state ID in Arizona before, pretty easy, get in the system, find it, yep, there you are, here's a voucher and a bus pass, go down to MVD and get a new ID. But if you haven't had an ID in Arizona before, or if it's been over a certain period of time, 20 years or something, then you have to start with a birth certificate. And a birth certificate, if you were born in Arizona and you know all the information on your birth certificate, 10 days, something like that, maybe 2 weeks, we'll probably have a birth certificate, and then we can get the state ID. But if you were born, let's say you were born in Utah at home, and the birth was never registered. So there is no birth certificate. Well, what happens in that situation? Well, depending on the state, we work with the state or the county, because every state's got it a little bit different, and we work to create a delayed birth certificate. And so half of our documents are birth certificates, and some of those are in, most of those are in support of getting the ID, and some of those are just for families, because you've got families with children, because you've got to have the ID to get kids properly enrolled in school and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of documents. We have 2 permanent locations: Human Service Campus downtown Phoenix. There's also a new sort of an attempt to replicate the Human Service Campus down in Tucson called the Center of Opportunity. We're in the Center of Opportunity in Tucson, just opened there about a year ago. And then we've got about 12 or so shared space locations where we'll go out and, at St. Vincent de Paul's Dining Room, Sunny Slope, and we're in Maryvale, and we're in Glendale, and that sort of thing. And I know we have talked about working with Paz de Cristo in Mesa. Paz de Cristo does some ID work, and they do limited birth certificate work. And I talked to Arlen, I guess their ex-executive director. I haven't met their new executive director, so if anybody knows him, I want to meet him. About helping them with some of the more difficult birth certificate situations that they run into. So our collaboration, if I went back and looked at our list of people that we helped last year and what agencies they came from, I guarantee it's going to be more than 50 organizations that we work with on an annual basis. Keep this in mind. If you don't have an ID, you can't get a job. You can't get housing. You can't get education. You can't get access to basic services. You are stuck. So ID is critical, and yet we're the only organization, we're one of a few organizations in the US that are actually doing this work on a full-time basis. So we're also working to try and create a national awareness around this problem. I mentioned earlier, half of Arizona's families are homeless are in families with children. And just to give you a sense of some of the populations that we work with, the evictions, I mentioned that number earlier. Kids aging out of foster care. Kids aging out of foster care and juvenile corrections without an ID is a disaster. I mean, what happens in that case? And look, there's numbers all over the place, and people make up numbers all the time. But I heard a guy who's with a agency that works with kids aging out of the foster care system, said that 75% of kids aging out of juvenile, out of foster care group homes, 75% are homeless or incarcerated within 1 year. I mean, if I don't know if that number's right, but if it's only half that number, that's absolutely ridiculous and fixable. So that's something that we're trying to work with as well. First-time homeless seniors is a big contributor to the homeless population these days. Domestic violence, trafficking survivors, and the reentry population as people come out of jail or prison. With that, Shira, I'm going to turn it back to you to talk about the near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
Homeless court.
It is. I love homeless court. So in 2013, the county adopted an evidence-based tool to triage individuals experiencing homelessness who are in need of shelter and housing. So I think I mentioned earlier, there's about 1,000 people a day that were coming to campus, but there wasn't really any data. So there was a big initiative by the county to create this tool, which is called Hsgb. And the reason I mention it is that it's a tool that prioritizes people. It's a triage tool that prioritizes people with issues like length of homelessness, risk factors related to health, substance abuse, vulnerability. One of the questions on this was, do you have any legal stuff going on? And I love this question because what is legal stuff? I did a Hsgb once in 4th Avenue Jail after they called to see if someone would come down. And I did this tool with an individual who was handcuffed to a table. We were surrounded by guards with guns, and his answer was, no, I don't have any legal stuff going on. So it is meant to be broad so that it could capture a lot of different things. I think what was interesting to me getting involved in this kind of work is that when I used to think of legal stuff, I had a pretty specific image in mind to what that means. I would think of activities that I think most of us would characterize as as bad, reckless, harmless to others. And of course, legal problems do cover a very large range of issues. What surprised me is how many things are not legal that we don't even have any idea that we would never even consider if it's not, doesn't directly affect us, right? So if someone is unhoused, this creates a lot of logistical issues of following the law. So think back to a few months ago when there was a curfew in Phoenix, when there were protests going on downtown in addition to COVID. So we had a curfew, right? What happens if you don't have a home to return to? It creates pretty limited options, right? If you are unhoused and shelters are full, which is almost always the case, and like Rick said, we'll talk about that at the end about some initiatives that are happening. But also what happens if you can't go into a shelter because you have a pet that you're not willing to get rid of and you can't bring the pet in? Where do you go? If you have nowhere to go because of these reasons, your options may be to sleep outside, to sleep in a tent, to sleep on a bus stop. If you're lucky, perhaps you have a vehicle. If this is the reality of your day-to-day life, it becomes very easy to get a trespassing charge. So what happens if you're one of the lucky people that happens to have a car, but you can't afford to pay insurance, can't register it? What do? Do you make the decision to sleep in your car knowing that it's illegal, or do you walk away from it? And those are very hard choices to make. Think of a time that you've had legal issues, right? So whether it's a speeding ticket or like what happened to me not long ago, I parked underneath a no parking sign, which I honestly did not see, but I had a bill. So I got a fine. So I got the fine in the mail. I went online. I was able to pay it. It was frustrating, but it was done, right? An event happened. I was able to take the steps needed to complete what I needed to do fairly easily, fairly quickly. So what happens if you don't have a mailing address? What happens if you don't have a computer or a credit card? So I don't know, this was new to me. I didn't know that you could get arrested for unpaid fines. So if you have traffic tickets, if you have a fine for obstructing a sidewalk, for jaywalking, for not having the correct light on your bicycle, it could be a fine if you don't have an address and don't get that in the mail or don't have other ways to pay it. Then you could get a bench warrant for failure to pay or failure to appear if you didn't know that you had a court date to come to. So homelessness in itself is not illegal, but sometimes activities that become part of survival really, or just living life, criminalize certain kind of behaviors, like sitting outside if you have no place to go and being out past curfew if you don't have any place to go. So this is a complex issue, as you can imagine. There's a lot of systemic barriers, and I don't know if there are a lot of simple solutions to this, but there are a few alternative systems that are in place that aim to provide possible solutions to these type of problems. So a few of those examples would be ACT teams, which is a sort of community treatment, street outreach, diversion programs, problem-solving courts. Each one of those examples could have its own 2-hour or own Sunday talk, and there are a lot of different approaches to this issue. My primary job is with an agency that works a lot within diversion and advocacy. So diversion is really interesting way to deal with some of this. So a problem-solving court, which is separate than diversion, is a way to address the fact that this doesn't have a one-size-fits-all type of solution. So Homeless Court, the Maricopa County Regional Homeless Court, is part of these problem-solving courts. And it provides a way to be able to have a conclusion to this or some sort of resolution. So some examples of problem-solving courts are family courts, veteran courts, mental health courts, drug courts. Those are all examples of what's considered a problem-solving court. And in Maricopa County, the Superior Court oversees all of these programs that I just mentioned for the problem-solving courts. And Homeless Court is one of those problem-solving courts as well. And in this picture that's in front of us, you could see the coordinator for Homeless Court and one of the judges that we have and some lawyers next to her. And Before I go into detail of how the program works, I want to point out one more thing about unpaid fines, because not only does unpaid fines create these issues that we kind of talked about with bench warrants, the consequences of having a warrant, and it's pretty easy to get a warrant, has a lot of impact. So if you've never had a warrant, you may not know that if you're looking for a job, if you have a warrant, that could be a barrier to getting a job. It could be a barrier to housing. And a lot of times people come to homeless court, they don't even know that they have a warrant. So it's usually a matter of they didn't have an address that they were using, so they didn't get the mail, and they didn't know that they had a warrant. And usually it pops up for them when they're looking for jobs where they are maybe qualifying for housing programs and unable to get into them because of these kind of warrants. Also, one more thing about warrants: if you have with an identification, if you need to get an identification, if you owe money for traffic fines, you can't get your license, but also you can't get a state ID without an expiration date. So if you have holds on your license, and if you have those kind of suspension and court fines, you could only get a state ID that's good for 6 months. So imagine all the barriers to get an ID anyway. Then add to that you have to do that every 6 months because you have an unpaid fine. So you have to go through this process constantly. Right. And so going back to the example of, and I'll talk more about what kind of cases we often hear, but a lot of times these cases that we hear are for not having a light on your bicycle. So when you think of someone that has the warrant, again, the whole concept of bad people doing bad things, and we think of warrants, we may have certain things in our mind, but I've known a lot of people who've had warrants for not having a light on their bicycle. And of course, that law exists for community safety, but do we feel safer knowing that someone without a light on their bike who can't afford to pay that fine, should they go to jail? Do we as taxpayers want to pay for those people to be in jail? So as you can imagine, once you get caught up in the system, it's easy to get anxiety about this. It's not that hard quashing warrants. If you show up to court, usually they'll quash it for you. But if it's your warrant and if you've been arrested for these kind of things before, you could see why someone may have a lot of anxiety around this. And then you could also see why it sort of becomes this revolving door of accumulating things. So Homeless Court was created in San Diego in the late 90s, and it created this model that is used to develop homeless courts across the county, across the United States. Our homeless court here, which is the Maricopa County Regional Homeless Court, was started in 2006. And originally it just had 3 courts that participated. In 2012, there was legislation that created an expansion, and now there are 46 courts within Maricopa County that participate in the program. So the cases that are heard in homeless court are all misdemeanor charges. So that means that the cases are within the lower jurisdiction court, so municipal courts and justice courts. So even though Superior Court oversees the program and has one court coordinator who's a staff member for Superior Court, they can't hear any cases out of that court specifically. So the cases have to be misdemeanors, the cases have to be victimless, which means that the money is owed to the court and not as restitution to a victim. So that is the criteria for cases that they will hear. The way the program works is that individuals who have these type of qualifying cases, they can't self-refer, so they have to go through a provider. And in order to qualify as an applicant, you have to meet certain criteria as well. So the court wants to see people who are making an effort of some sort to move forward. And what's wonderful about that is that it could be quantified in various ways. So this is not a one-size-fits-all program at all. So you do have to be experiencing homelessness, just like if you're a veteran, you'll go to veteran court. So sometimes people call me who are not experiencing homelessness, but that is a criteria for homeless court. And you have to be involved with programs that are meant to create some sort of stability and progress and growth. The court defines this as individuals who demonstrate a commitment to end their homelessness is how it's defined by the charter of the court. There are currently 38 registered providers which could represent people in court since they can't self-refer. There's not that many who participate regularly. I feel like there's a pretty small core group of providers that that we see at the dockets. And these providers could include a variety of different types of agencies. So it has to be a program that deals within homelessness. Ending homelessness is sort of the criteria for this, but it's pretty broad. So it can include shelters, it can include transitional housing programs. It could also include substance abuse, like rehab, or behavioral health programs, group homes. So it's pretty broad in terms of how to become a provider that could then advocate for people for homeless court. What's unique about the campus, which is where we have homeless court as well, is that it doesn't matter where you're coming from. So a lot of the programs, a lot of the providers, they'll only represent the client that's in their program. So if a domestic violence shelter who's a provider wants to go to homeless court, they will only represent someone who's in their specific domestic violence shelter program. Where on campus, our philosophy in general is if you need help, we'll help you. And we're a low barrier organization on campus. And the criteria for representation through campus providers, and that's what I do, I'm an advocate on the campus for clients that have legal stuff, will represent you as long as you qualify for those other criteria that is set by the court. So the program component is important because we use those hours that go towards fines. So it's not community service, it's called community restitution. And community restitution can include volunteering and community service, but the idea is to be active in programs that benefit the individual. So we ask during the application process, what caused someone's homelessness? And the idea is then those program hours reflect some of that. So the hours could be counseling, it could be going to recovery groups, it could be vocational rehab, it could be looking for housing. It's all those things that are creating stability. And we use those hours that then go towards the fines. And the cases that are accepted are varied. I feel like usually this is the question I get most often, what kind of cases do we hear? So there are a lot of traffic charges. Owning a car is expensive, and so we do hear a lot of traffic charges. We've had clients who were able to get their license for the first time in decades sometimes. We have a lot of jaywalking and light rail violation tickets. We have a lot of what the court considers quality of life charges. So things like trespassing, loitering, urinating in public, drinking in public, obstruction of a sidewalk. So yes, obstructing a sidewalk is illegal. I didn't know that before I was involved in this program. The court does accept charges relating to substance use. And remember, these are misdemeanor charges without offenses. So we do hear a lot of things like possession, DUI, drinking in public. Some cases could go either way. It depends if it's money owed to the court or money owed as restitution. So shoplifting could go either way, but we have heard shoplifting cases. Another wonderful impact of the program is that clients are able to quash warrants. I can't tell you how many people, as I said, contact me because they found out they had a warrant that they never knew about. In the past month alone, we've been able to work with public defenders and prosecutors in Phoenix Municipal Court, which they've really been wonderful, as we're waiting for approval through homeless court, being able to quash warrants because people are accepted into housing, but then they can't take that final step because they have a warrant, which is preventing them from getting into a supportive housing program. In the past month, the 3 warrants that we quashed with Phoenix were all for trespassing. So for things like sleeping behind a garbage can on a business. So those are the type of things that we often see, and I feel have some of the biggest impacts. There's also a guarantee of no arrest. So people could come to see us and they're coming to see social workers, and so we can't arrest them anyway, but there's a guarantee of no arrest. So even if someone has an issue that they're not able to solve through homeless court, we'll still work on resolving it the best we can, whether it's referrals through other legal services that we work with. So since its inception in 2006, court has always been held on campus. There's a rotation of judges that come to resolve the cases. There's a waiting list, I hear, because it's really a wonderful thing to sit in on. It's sort of it's the final step of homeless court. So it's the graduation basically, and it's open to everyone. So I encourage you all to come and sit in once life goes back to normal and once we have it in person and not virtually. it's a really powerful experience. People usually cry. Like I said, people will get their license after decades of not having their license, or people have gone through such a process to get to this point to have enough hours to resolve the fines that they are celebrating also their recovery. They may have gotten their children back from DCS. Some of them may be in housing at the time of graduation, even though they weren't when they first started. So it's really a wonderful experience. What's one of my favorite things to see also is it's usually the first positive experience that people are having with the system. So, you know, if you're scared of all these things happening to you, and it's always a matter of a power imbalance. So coming to the campus and having friendly judges and lawyers who want to help is really powerful to see people having a positive experience with the system, and also being celebrated, all other accomplishments being celebrated. So when we go back to in person, you could combine a tour of the campus and Homeless Corps. We have that once a month. And I will pass it on to Rick. Thank you.
Thank you, Shira. Homeless Court, you know, when I take people on that tour of the campus, when we get to the spot where we stop and talk about Homeless Court, there's always a jillion questions that I can't answer. And I'm, you know, personally hearing Shira today, I've learned more about Homeless Court than I've known before. So I'm gonna have to tack on an extra 15 minutes to the tour. It's amazing stuff. I mean, somebody comes to Homeless ID Project, and they you know, they don't have an ID because it was in their van when their van got towed because they were, you know, doing something. You know, they're living in their van, and now we can't get them a driver's license replaced because they've got a fine on their record because their van was towed. You know, it's just this whole ridiculous circular thing. So it's an amazing, to me, it's an amazing thing. That Homeless Court is in existence. Let me talk just for a minute, if I can find my notes here real quick. I stopped sharing. You should be looking now at us rather than at any picture of anything. Is that right, Shira? Did I do it right? I'm getting better at this. You know, if this pandemic, if this pandemic lasts long enough, I'm going to become a professional Zoomer. Great stuff. Anyway. You know, one of the things that strikes me as I talk to people about homelessness, I talk to people about the Human Service Campus, I talk to people about the Homeless ID Project, and what can we do? I know that helping others is in our DNA. I know that. I mean, and that doesn't mean that everybody helps, but at our core, at the core of Homo sapiens is a couple of different things. And, you know, one of them is like fear and, you know, that kind of stuff, and people react to that. But another one is like caring and community and helping. And I think that so many people in our community want to help, and they don't know how to help, and they don't know where to help, and they don't even know when to help, you know, and there's so many things that people can do to plug in to our community and to help out. You know, I mentioned earlier, you get off the freeway, there's a guy with a sign. I know that handing $2 out the window is not going to be as productive as using $2 to buy a bus pass to get somebody down to MBD from the Homeless ID Project. I know that. I know that that's not a well-spent $2. And yet I feel conflicted. And I'm sitting at the light just like you are. And I'm hoping that the light changes before the guy gets to me. And we all experience that on a regular basis in our world today. So, you know, what do we do with that? And I think what we do with that is, you know, we just come to recognize that there are places we can help. And there's all kinds of places around the valley. So I'm not just plugging the Human Service Campus, and I'm not just plugging Homeless ID Project, but I'm plugging Human Service Campus and Homeless ID Project. You know, there are things that you can do to help all over the community. So people say, you know, if we're on the tour of the campus, somebody would say, well, you know, so what can I do? I mean, you know, I'd like to, you know, maybe we can get a group of people together and we can, you know, we can serve a meal, or, you know, bring a meal down here. And I got to tell you, that happens all the time. You know, I call that my grandmother's solution. My grandmother would feed people. That's what she would do. Well, there's 3 meals a day, 7 days a week on the Human Service Campus. So what happens when you bring your church group, your community group, your neighborhood group, your whatever group down to the human service campus with a busload of people and a couple baskets of tacos or burritos and start handing those out. Well, there's one of three things that's going to happen. One, a meal's going to go to waste because there's already 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. And whether it's the burrito that goes to waste or the meal that's been prepared at St. Vincent de Paul or Andre House, you're going to have waste. The other thing, the second thing that's going to happen is that somebody tries to save that because I just had a meal, so I'll have this tomorrow. This would be great. Well, there's no refrigeration on the street, and now you got foodborne illnesses, which can be quite dangerous. And then the third thing that happens, and actually it happens maybe more often than anything else, is that people just, they just throw it, they just discard it right where they are on the street. And whether it's clothing or food or whatever else it is that people are handing out, I mean, handing out is satisfies that I want to help thing, but doesn't maybe necessarily provide the kind of help that you're hoping that you can provide. So I'm just suggesting that you be thoughtful in that and that you look at, what we can do. I might get a little preachy here for a minute, so if I do, feel free to cut my mic. There's a a book that I refer back to on a regular basis. It's called The Soul of Money, and it's written by a woman named Lynn Twist. And you like that, huh, Ron? And Lynn Twist was one of the original people involved in a thing called the Hunger Project. And the Hunger Project set out to solve hunger on a national basis, on a worldwide basis in the mid-70s, and they largely accomplished that mission. Imagine accomplishing that mission. They largely accomplished that mission. I mean, certainly people go to bed hungry each night in cities and countries all over the world, but we don't have villages and nations starving to death like we had when the Hunger Project set out to do what the Hunger Project did. So back to Lynn Twist and her book. She's a fundraiser for the Hunger Project, and the book is largely about money, not about fundraising. So it's about the concept that there's enough. There's enough in our world. There's enough to go around. And it's about the myth of scarcity, and that the creation of this myth of scarcity causes people to behave in ways where they hoard money and resources. And that is a myth, and we don't have to do that because there is enough. Now, all that said, and I've said the book is not about fundraising, the thing as a fundraiser that strikes me really hard about Lynn's book is that she says, when I started in fundraising, I thought of it, I came to think of it over a period of time as not about asking people for money, not about getting people to do my will or to follow what I was trying to buy what I was trying to sell. But I came to think of it rather as giving people an opportunity to express their greatness. And I think if we approach giving, if we approach helping, now remember, I'm not talking about the Human Service Campus and the Homeless ID Project, but I'm not talking about the Human Service Campus and the Homeless ID Project too. But if we approach the notion of giving and helping as really expressing our greatness, giving us an opportunity to do what it is that we inherently in our DNA want to do, and finding a place to plug that in, I think that can be really powerful. And there are opportunities, right here in our community. Sort of a last note on that. I occasionally do a blog or a write-up of some sort or another. I'm gonna put another screen up here if you'll bear with me. I do a little bit of writing on blogs and what have you, and this whole notion of starfish. You've all heard that story, right? The guy on the beach and the million starfish and one lonely guy, and he's throwing the starfish back, and some cynic comes along and what are you doing? And the guy says, well, I helped that one. I think that's all bunk. Here's what I think. I think the starfish is great, but helping is not about a lone guy on a beach. Helping is about community. Helping is about what you folks are doing every Sunday, getting together and talking about the opportunities that exist for you to plug into your community. It's not a starfish world, it's a community world. And the difference between Homo sapiens and any other being on the planet is that we have this ability to be community and to help in our community. So I'm going to put my soapbox away now, but I really do believe that what you folks are doing is so fundamentally important to exercising your humanness and being engaged and involved in your community. So with that, Shira, we got a screen here full of stuff where people can express their greatness. And one of them, let me talk about the Arizona tax credit, then I'll turn it over to Shira. If you don't know about the Arizona tax credit, you really need to. In the state of Arizona, the state says for qualifying charitable organizations, you can take a part of your tax bill and move it over to a qualifying charitable organization, and it will reduce your tax bill by that amount. So if you donated $1 to a qualifying charitable organization, you get it back on your taxes, costs you nothing. And there are 4 different tax credits. There's the Arizona Qualifying Charitable Organization. Homeless ID Project is a qualifying charitable organization. There's the school tax credit, public and private, that's 2 of them, and then there's the foster care. So when I ask people if they've used their tax credit, typically they say, well, one of 2 things. Either they say, gosh, well, which means they don't know, or they say, yeah, well, sure, we support our kids' schools. Great, you can support your kids' schools and make a donation to a qualifying charitable organization, and you'll get it all back on your taxes, up to $400 per individual and up to $800 for a family. So Shira, in kind.
Yeah, so in-kind donations are always needed as well. And I know that the center is in Mesa, so I don't know how far people live away. And there are definitely organizations. And if someone wants more suggestions for things for the East Valley as well, I'd be happy to share them. But I know on the campus, and again, about 1,000 people a day come there, there's always stuff that's needed. So during the summer, that is water bottles, which could be everything from actual people dropping off cases to, if you don't want to schlep the cases, to writing a check specifically for the water drive, but water bottles, sunscreen. During the winter, there's more of a need for socks, blankets, warm clothing. Things that are always needed is hygiene and underwear and adult diapers. So there's always a need for that. So sometimes people say, I want to have a drive specifically for something. So adult diapers, hygiene items, sanitary items are always needed. I think right now the campus is good with things like masks and things related to COVID, just because there's been really a lot of things donated through the county and through the state. But those kind of things are always needed. Everyone, if you travel, when we travel again, everyone I know always takes all the stuff from the hotel. Those mini bottles are wonderful. So as you travel, always keep, clear out the hotel room. And those are really good to have in those small hygiene bags, just because if you don't have a shower, you don't want the big Costco sized shampoos. So there's a whole list that I could send out if people want more suggestions, but so many things could be donated, things that we don't even think of. I feel like my car is always full because people know if they have stuff that they don't want, I'll take them and I'll find a home for them. So whether it's professional clothing that could go to someplace like St. Joseph's the Worker, or hangers, even plastic bags. If you get plastic bags and don't know what to do with them and just put them in the recycle, that exists outside of supermarkets, bags are needed. So there's so many things that wouldn't even occur to us that are really helpful to individuals. And if you want, I could share that with you as well. Volunteer opportunities are limited now in COVID times. So if you want, we're also, I think our emails are on this as well, and we'll include that. So if you have specific interests of how to volunteer, what else could be done, Rick's going to talk about some advocacy, and sometimes volunteering doesn't mean going down and physically doing something. I know that the group already does things like weaving those blankets, which is wonderful, and I see people using them. They are very appreciated. I could tell you that. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved with your time as well. So if you want more information about that, you could email me directly, and Rick's going to talk about.
And I would say same with me. I mean, please, there's different ways that people can help, and you may have an idea that you think, this might be a good way to do it. Let us know, and we can figure out where to plug that in. Frequently get an email or a telephone call from somebody who's knitted a bunch of hats or something, that they want to figure out how to use those. So let me just quickly hit on legislation. We've got 8 minutes left, and I don't know what kind of time we can bleed over or what have you. But on advocacy, we are working, Homeless ID Project is working with the Representative Reginald Boulding, State Representative Boulding, on a fee waiver for state IDs and driver's licenses for people who are experiencing homelessness. 2 years ago, we passed that for homeless military veterans. We came back the next year for the rest of the homeless population because we were encouraged to do so. And we've gotten as far as we could go. And we got blocked in the Rules Committee by Anthony Kern from Glendale. He wouldn't let our bill be heard, but it would have passed. I mean, we're just getting a lot of positive positive feedback from legislators on that. And then last but not least, From Street to Home, you can see the website there. Please write that down. Take a look at fromstreetttohome.org. That is the effort where the Human Service Campus and all of the campus partners are working together to try and increase the number of people who are allowed to sleep safely every night and not have to wander the streets. And then we're asking the city of Phoenix to give us an opportunity not to expand the size of the campus, but to expand the number of people we can serve. So take a look at that. And with that, I think if there are any questions, Ron, if we haven't bored everybody into sleep or whatever, we'll take whatever you got.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to touch on that Lynn twist and effective altruism, really donating and doing the best that you can with what you donate. And to say that when we know better, we do better. And I sincerely appreciate you guys coming here and helping to inform us of ways that we can give and contribute. So some of the first questions from Kathy Pettigrew. We've been making sleeping mats from grocery bags. We used to give them to Dumbleweed, which had an outreach in Tempe. They have since closed in March. Can you use these?
Yes, so Tumbleweed was actually became part of UMOM. So I think if you want specifically to work with youth, UMOM is working with youth. There's also, we could always use them, and I could coordinate. I live in Tempe, so I could, if it could fit in a Prius, I could take things down to the campus as well. But yes, so definitely those are great. I love those sleeping mats, and I've seen them everywhere, and they are wonderful because when things get wet, they don't dry out. So you could, I put our email address as well there, so you could email me if you want to coordinate and getting those donated.
Perfect. Kathy also has a Prius, so she needs to know where they go.
Yes, it is.
And then a question from Alex. Is there data on how the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting people experiencing homelessness?
Yes. Until recently, we had virtually no COVID on the Human Service Campus. Over the last 4 or 5 weeks, there have been a few cases diagnosed. It's still the incidence of COVID among the homeless population on the Human Service Campus is lower than in the general population. We've worked with Maricopa County. We've worked with Circle the City is one of our partners on the campus. Maricopa County Health and Circle the City have worked alongside the campus to get people once diagnosed off the campus into. There are a couple of hotels that have been designated for the purpose of getting people isolated. And they're isolating people who have COVID who need to be isolated. They're also isolating people who don't have COVID, but who are with people who have COVID and they need to be isolated from them. So the response has been wonderful. The county's been great to work with. The ASU has provided COVID testing for every agency on the campus. So at Homeless ID Project, our people are tested for COVID once a week. And, it hasn't been ideal, but it's been better than we might have expected.
Excellent.
And I think, by the way, the masking and hand washing stations on the campus contribute to that. So to your point earlier, Ron, about masking and whatnot.
Perfect. Luke, do you want to ask your question or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, I can ask that. So does the Regional Homeless Court provide any information or educational resources to specifically judges and court staff in the justice and municipal court systems that feed into the homeless court, and just information on how to manage those referrals and also how to handle cases adjacent to homelessness in an informed manner?
Yes, so we do get judicial referrals. Sometimes the homeless court sort of exists in a limbo state. So the cases remain with the specific courts until they're resolved through homeless court. Sometimes judges just know that there is a homeless court. They don't know how it works. So a lot of times they send people down to that monthly hearing that we would have, and people would come to sign up, and I would always feel bad because it's like, no, this is the last step. So they're aware of it. I don't know that everyone knows the specific steps on how to do it. Not all clerks know about it. There's definitely, I've seen gaps. What's nice is some courts have sort of their own internal homeless courts. So actually Mesa Municipal is doing some really interesting things with a community, I think it's called community court, which is similar to homeless court. And I think their judge comes to Paz de Cristo about once a month as well. And City of Phoenix also, Glendale. So I'm seeing some courts just being more open in their approach. I know there's been talk with Phoenix Municipal of sort of having something internalized of just, instead of going through the process that could take months, just applying the same logic of how to resolve it. So it's a complex issue. So it may be a while in the making, but I feel like I've seen a shift in courts being more open. So they do know about it, but there's definitely ways that we could make the process smoother.
That's
Not
interesting.
we. I mean, I'm not with homeless court. I use the word we. But I've just been involved with homeless court for so long. But it's definitely getting. It has a broader reach now.
It's interesting, and I even think about, I mean, justice court has jurisdiction over eviction hearings, for example. I mean, there are a lot of facets of the law that intersect with homelessness issues one way or another, that it helps if we share knowledge.
Yes, there is. And what's nice is, so for homeless court, like I was saying, it's very specific. We can only work with court fines. So a lot of people come to see me for legal stuff in general. And I love it. My background is in social work. So I think if one is a lawyer, they have to go through these are the processes where I feel like I'm able to problem solve in ways that are more creative and get things done. And I just think social workers do that in general. But so we get a lot of people coming to campus thinking I'm a lawyer, just having legal questions that I don't know the answer to, or I wouldn't give legal advice anyway. So we have sort of like a little network. So St. Vincent de Paul in downtown Phoenix has a full-time lawyer on staff. We work with referrals to community legal service for evictions, housing, employment. So there are not a lot, I wish we had more, but there are people in the Valley that provide other legal services. So we do our best to be in touch so that we know they could send people to us if it's specific to homeless court. If someone has an issue related to employment or evictions, I would refer them to community legal service. And then also what's nice with probation, which to me was a very big shift in corrections. So even though I work with people who are involved with the justice system, I'm on the behavioral health side, I'm a social worker. It's not that there's a side, it's not a linear thing with the system and corrections is here, but sometimes there can be. And the reason that they brought probation officers to the campus is so many people had warrants because they may be homeless in downtown Phoenix, but their PO may be in North Scottsdale. So if you don't have a car, how are you going to make those appointments? So people were having so many warrants for these logistical type of issues. So I think it was in 2013 or 14, probation said, let's put a PO and assign people specifically to that person. And it started with a few hours, a few times a month, to now there's 2 probation officers that are there twice a week, and they have a caseload for people who are specifically experiencing homelessness. So it was just wonderful to see a solution that was beneficial for the individuals who are on probation, and also I'm sure very cost effective for not having to worry about warrants. That it was a relatively simple solution to address that problem. And so it's really a positive sign to see adult probation, which is through MCSO, having people on campus. And I wish that we had more of those kind of collaborations with other law enforcement agencies.
And putting the solutions where the people are. I love
Yes.
that. Yep.
Yes.
We have time for one final question. If someone would like to unmute and ask the question. I do have one other question here.
Looks like Chet raised his hand.
Who was it?
Chet has raised his hand.
Go for it, Chet. You got to unmute.
Unmute. Oh, there
There
I
you
got
go.
it. There I got it. Well, I got two questions. I'm cheating on you. One of them is you talked about the people who were in jail because they didn't have a light on their bike. And I was wondering if there's homeless people who prefer to be in jail because they have a place to sleep and something to eat. The other question is, I really loved what you said about humans being communal creatures. And I was wondering if the homeless develop any sense of community at your very nice facilities there. And does that sense of community help them along with the help that you give them?
Let me answer the second question, if I might. I don't know the answer to the first question, and Shira, you might be brave enough to take a stab at that, but I wouldn't. But the second question yes, there is definitely a sense of community. In fact, there are Facebook pages and social media pages and all kinds of sort of modern communication devices that are in which there is participation from the homeless community and from homeless individuals helping one another across this county and across this nation. I don't think that it goes to the point of being so comfortable that that it discourages people from ending their homelessness. I think, just like Reverend Roseberry in 1987 expected to find a bunch of people living happily in their community, living the hobo life. I mean, he really thought that. And that wasn't the case. It was, people do the best they can and people help each other out most of the time. And so those things are definitely evident in the homeless community.
Thank you. Yeah, I think any sense that they can help each other gives them a good feeling, just like we have a good feeling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I got to tell you that it seems to me like people who don't have are often more willing to help and give than some that do have. And I don't mean to make any generalizations there, but I think, we've all gotten that sense from time to time that some people are really, really, really good at giving. And
I can appreciate that.
yeah.
All right. And how do homeless people find out or make their way to these important services in downtown Phoenix when Phoenix is so sprawled?
So in a variety of ways, there are a lot of street outreach teams. I know, and some of it is city specific. So Tempe has interesting programs that are specific to Tempe. The thing, and Rick had made the point before that a lot of people call the campus CAS, which is not. CAS is one of the buildings that's on campus, but a lot of people, just refer to it as CAS. So I feel like if you're experiencing homelessness, most people are aware of services there, especially with Homeless City Project, because it's really the only agency that does this. It's expanded and it's now in more places, but it used to be the only location was there. So there are a lot of services that are vital that people would travel there. So I feel like within the community, it's known. There are also, Rick had mentioned what to do with, when you're sitting at that light and someone, is there and the conflict, that we all have. There are cards. It's a small card. It's called You Matter. And I think you could print them off HSC's website, or if someone wants, I could drop them off as well. But it has a little map and instructions on how to get to the campus, some of the services that are offered there. I know for homeless court, a lot of judges will refer people to, when I used to work, I haven't worked on campus since 2014. I used to work there full time. I left and now I just do homeless court on Saturdays. And then when we have the monthly hearing, but there used to be lawyers in Phoenix Municipal specifically that would tell people before the judge will see you, you have to resolve a few things, and they would make direct referrals for people to come to campus. So we do get those entities that refer people to us as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And also, unfortunately, it is sometimes a dumping ground. A lot of times you see people coming straight from jail, straight from prison, from hospitals. So there is a process of hospital dumping, and what to do, because accountability needs to exist. But unfortunately, that does happen a lot too. So sometimes people come to the campus not by choice, but because they are brought there by those kind of entities.
Yeah, if I could make a point on that, we, right before COVID, we had made an agreement with Maricopa County Sheriff's Department. They've got a program called Mosaic, which is for repeat offenders for addiction issues, typically drugs, but maybe alcohol as well. And if people agree to go through that program, it's a 7-week program, they agree to go through that program, they will get an early release. And if they get an early release and they don't have an ID and they don't have a job, then they're going to show up on the campus, and it's going to be, sort of downhill from there in many cases. And so we have instituted a program that we've yet to be able to implement to help people as they're coming through that Mosaic program, to identify who needs an ID, who needs a birth certificate before they can get the ID, that sort of thing. I toured the Durango County Jail through that program right before we signed up for it, and there was a cohort of 30 females at Estrella and 30 male cohorts at Durango, and I had a chance to speak to one of the 30 male cohorts, and of the 30, 24 were going to be coming out of jail without an ID. 24. If you come out of jail without an ID, you're probably headed back to jail. And 2 of the 24 had never had an ID in Arizona before, so we're going to need to start with a birth certificate. Similarly, I'm trying to have conversations, and if anybody knows anybody who knows anybody, I'm trying to have conversations with the state, with DOC, so that we can get some work done in there as well. Because if people are coming out of jail, prison, juvenile corrections, foster care, whatever, if they're coming out without ID, they're going to have an uphill climb.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, then I think we will call it here. We will stop the recordings. Thank you so much for coming and spending your time, treasure, and talent with us today. I personally learned a lot, and when you know better, you do better. So I really appreciate your time today, and thank you very much.
Ron, thank you for having us. Really, really a pleasure, and just to have an opportunity to share this with the community. And if anybody on this call, or if anybody knows anybody on this call knows anybody who would like to learn more about the Human Service Campus, please don't hesitate. I've created a virtual tour of the Human Service Campus. Be happy to take you on.